A hearty welcome to one and all, back in the car for episode 153 of the Confessions of a Not So Dangerous Mind podcast. I'd like to thank you all for joining me on this. Stop me if you've heard this before. Rainy day in New York, because it rains every day in New York in April. But if you're checking out this episode on the YouTube channel, haven't done so already, please click like, subscribe, comment, share, turn on those notifications. Or if you catch this episode on the audio platforms such as Spotify or iTunes, same general rule applies. Click like, subscribe, share, and turn on those notifications. So, something that is discussed maybe not quite as frequently as it once was, the idea of guilty pleasure movies. Now, my understanding of that, and this is the sort of thing where I feel like there will be different interpretations of what the phrase guilty pleasure means in general, but my interpretation as far as a guilty pleasure movie is a movie that we can always watch and always enjoy, a movie that we love. But if somebody asked us, is this a great movie? No. Is it even a good movie? No. Now, there are certain people who would claim, for example, I know a few women who say the original Bridget Jones' Diary is a guilty pleasure movie. Okay, but that's a good movie. I would never myself classify something that is actually a good movie as guilty pleasure. For me, again, this is just my interpretation, my opinion. It has to be a movie that you know is not good and you love it anyway, and you can always watch it. That is my dictionary definition. It's not really a dictionary definition, but that's how I define a guilty pleasure movie. My number one guilty pleasure movie is Sylvester Stallone's 1986 Dirty Harry retread cop thriller, Cobra. It's a movie that I've loved from the first time I saw it. You know, I loved her from the first time I saw her. I loved Cobra from the first time I laid eyes on it. In 1987 on HBO, another movie that I really shouldn't have been watching because I was only, 12, maybe 13. It's brutal, it's bloody, it's violent. It's really just like a lot of viciousness and nastiness. I mean, compared to Dirty Harry's a great film anyway, but Cobra is, there are certain beats of the story in common. But Cobra's not a good movie. There's zero character development. The villains are all one-dimensional. Hell, Marion Cobretti is pretty much one-dimensional. Ingrid Knudsen, the Brigitte Nielsen character, is one-dimensional. It's a terrible movie, objectively speaking. Having said that, I love it, and I owe that film a debt of gratitude. Because when I was a senior at New York University, I took a course called Film Theory, which the most difficult undergraduate film course offered by any undergraduate film program, whether you're at NYU, whether you're at UCLA, USC, or Columbia. Film Theory is difficult. It's no joke. It's basically applying Freudian psychoanalysis to movies. It's not so easy. I wrote my film theory term paper, which accounted for 90% of my final grade. I wrote it on Cobra. And I ended up getting an A on the paper and an A in the class, and that was the last kind of conventional film class that I took at New York University. It was in 1996, and I ended up graduating in 97. I took one more film class, but it was like some kind of advanced seminar. It wasn't really that interesting. Cobra was directed by George Cosmatos. And George Cosmatos, kind of an up and down career. People who don't like him used to refer to him as George Comatose. To give you some idea, there's a level of humor of 80s and 90s movie critics. They thought that was funny. But George Cosmatos is actually a talented filmmaker. And he did Rambo First Blood Part 2. It's not that good. I don't like that. I would say that First Blood is the best movie in that entire series, and I'm not really that big of a fan of that one either. Rambo First Blood Part 2 is complete ridicularity. It's absurd. I love Stallone, but the movie itself is, other than I'm coming to get you, not that great. So Cosmatos and Sly went to work on Cobra not long after completing work on Rambo First Blood Part 2, which had been a massive, humongous box office hit. More of a kind of phenomenon than the original First Blood. And Sly had already kind of written this script for something else, which doesn't really make sense, except for the fact that Sylvester Stallone, at a certain point in the early 80s, was given the screenplay for what became Beverly Hills Cop, which he liked. He thought it was a terrific script, and Marty Brest, who ended up directing the film, was somebody that he liked and he wanted to work with. And Stallone was coming off of a not super successful sequel to Saturday Night Fever, Staying Alive, which he made with, his buddy John Travolta. And he got the Beverly Hills Cop script right around the time, I believe, he was getting ready to make the movie Rhinestone with Dolly Parton, which was also not a good movie. Like, what were they doing? What were they doing? And I understand about Stallone wanting to do something other than blood and guts action, whether it was Nighthawks or First Blood or Rocky movies. But man, Rhinestone, what are you doing? Stallone as a country singer? Did he do it because Clint Eastwood had been a country singer in Honky Tonk Man right around that time? I don't know. Is it monkey see, monkey do? So Stallone got the Beverly Hills Cop script, and he thought it was funny and it was entertaining and he could see how it could work. Hey, this is terrific. I like it. He asked the powers that be, I'm pretty sure it was Paramount, was the studio in charge of production. Can I rework the script? Is it okay if I take a whack at the script and maybe make some changes you guys might like or not like, but can I take a crack at it? Yeah, of course you can, Sly. Now, remember, he had been nominated for Best Screenplay. He was never just an actor. Stallone was somebody who was very involved in every stage of the creative process, any movie he's in. So he asked if he could take a crack at the script. Now, of course, the studio, they wanted him to star in the movie, so they're not going to say no. So he took a crack at the Beverly Hills Cop script, and he took out a lot of the humor and upped the violence and added a serial killer angle to it. That's not the movie that Paramount wanted to make. They wanted to make something akin to what was in the script. They liked the fact that it was, yes, it had serious moments and there's violence and bloodshed, but it's funny. This can be funny. The script is written in a somewhat lighter tone than what Stallone presented, taking out all of the humor and making it more of a conventional fish out of water Detroit cop, which Sly could easily play, goes to Beverly Hills and tries to solve a series of crimes or whatever. So Stallone actually really liked his own script, and he was surprised that Paramount that they didn't spark to it. So he exited the project, and thank goodness it went to Eddie Murphy. They put back the humor, and then Eddie was able to ad-lib and add laughs on his own because he's Eddie Murphy, and he's one of those magical people, especially when he was in his 20s, who had the ability to literally create movie magic on the spot. And very few people throughout history have been able to do that. Eddie was one of them. So what Stallone worked on for Beverly Hills Cop, a high percentage of that is what ended up being Cobra. And the joke was, in certain circles, they started to call it Beverly Hills Cobra because it was so similar to the screenplay that he worked on and resubmitted for his interpretation of Beverly Hills Cop. So in order to, and this is something I've always respected Sly for, he doesn't run from paying homage. He doesn't run from the people in the business whose work he admires and movies that he has loved and would like to make his interpretation of. So he knew going into production of Cobra, there were going to be comparisons to Clint Eastwood's Dirty Harry. It was unavoidable because, hold on a sec. It was unavoidable because he was making a cop thriller in California, although set in LA as opposed to San Francisco. And there's a serial killer or series of serial killers. There are going to be comparisons. So rather than pretend that that's not what he was doing or that he was not a huge fan of Clint and Dirty Harry, he decided to kind of face it headlong. And he hired 2 actors. When I say he hired, he brought them on. He didn't literally hire them. But 2 actors who played pivotal roles in Dirty Harry, the 1971 original with Clint, the movie that put Clint over the top and made him a global phenomenon, a global superstar. Renny Santoni plays Stallone's partner in Cobra, Gonzalez. He plays a character named Gonzalez. He's Dirty Harry's partner in the original Dirty Harry. I like to think it's the same guy 15 years later. I don't know if it is, because in Dirty Harry, his character actually leaves the police force, and he is in San Francisco and not LA. But the fact that he has the same name is a fucking howler. And I give Sly all props for doing it and making it so blatantly obvious. So he had Renny Santoni, who has a huge role in Cobra and a big role in Dirty Harry. He's fantastic in Dirty Harry, especially because his character seems like he's going to be a throwaway, and he proves to be very, very critical to the unfolding of the story. And he actually we get a little bit of character growth from Clint, and there's very little character development of Harry Callahan, but we get enough. And the character of Chico Gonzalez, that's the character that Renny Santoni plays in Dirty Harry, is a catalyst in us understanding Harry Callahan more. He's not just a troll who does his job. He is somebody who has experienced enormous tragedy, and when somebody stands up for him, he doesn't ignore it, he takes notice. And the slow evolution of the relationship between Rennie's character in Dirty Harry and Clint is really one of the highlights of the film, and it's something that sneaks up on you. And their last scene together is just marvelous. So that's one where he's saying, hey, look who I'm casting, ha ha ha. And then he cast Andrew Robinson, who played, to spectacular effect, the Scorpio killer in Dirty Harry. Andrew Robinson is cast as kind of top brass in the branch of the LAPD that Stallone's character of Marion Cobretti works. And he's technically a good guy because he's trying to stop murders, but he's such an asshole, and he busts Stallone's chops to such a crazy extent that we can't wait. We know that at some point Stallone's going to fucking take this guy and he's going to slug him. And we wait for it the whole movie, and Sly does not disappoint. So 2 actors who played major roles in the original Dirty Harry have big roles in Cobra. And Stallone had fun with it, and we as the audience, if we know what we're looking at, we have fun with it because we remember, oh yeah, these are the guys from Dirty Harry, this is terrific. But the actual plot of Cobra, it does have the parallels to Dirty Harry more on the surface because it involves serial killer. In this case, more than one. Although there is one particular guy who seems to be doing the lion's share of the dirty work, and a very memorable looking actor who's quite successful, and he's been on TV. His name is Brian Thompson, and he's really good. He's really good. And so Stallone plays a guy who is married to chaos. He's married to whatever weaponry he might have on hand, and he is very much, he's dirtier than Dirty Harry. Dirty Harry had way more of a moral code and moral fiber, and the sequels kind of explored that, which I thought was terrific, the Dirty Harry sequels, because the first movie establishes him as somebody who's not afraid to, I won't say shoot first and ask questions later, but he's not afraid to take risks and get into gray area kind of police work. Cobra is much more overt and much more over the top when it comes to this. No pun intended. I say over the top because that was another Stallone movie that he made after Cobra. But the basic setup is there have been an ongoing series of kind of ritual type slayings, and it's known as the Night Slasher case, and it's actually a little bit of a clever twist in the movie that what we think is a killer is actually a band of horrendous scumbag murderers. And Stallone's character is presented early in the film as a lone wolf. Now, unlike Harry Callahan, who we get the idea, well, not get the idea, Harry Callahan had been married and his wife died tragically. And we're led to believe that's why he's so withdrawn and closed off. and why he has such a shitty attitude almost all of the time. He's angry because presumably he was a very young man when his wife died needlessly, when a drunk driver crossed the center line and bashed into her car and killed her. We don't get any of that. There's not even the slightest bit of character development or attempted character development of Stallone's main character, Marion Cobretti, hence why his nickname is Cobra. Cobretti is his last name. So he's a great cop. He's not afraid to bend the rules, and he's on something called the Zombie Squad. I always got a kick out of that. He's on the Zombie Squad. Basically, he has more latitude than your average police officer to police. And there are things that he we're led to believe, has gotten away with that other cops would be probably suspended and or thrown off the force entirely. But because and here's the Dirty Harry angle, he's doing stuff that no other cop will do. And he doesn't mind. So they just kind of close their eyes and let him do his thing, let the Cobra do his thing. So Stallone meets the character played by Brigitte Nielsen, and this is something that is a major difference from Dirty Harry. There are I hate to say it this way, there are very few female characters that have speaking parts in Dirty Harry. And Stallone, at least there is an attempt to do something other than have a bunch of guys with guns shooting each other or cutting each other up with knives or stabbings or whatever it might be, shit blowing up. Brigitte plays the only witness to the serial killer and or killers, this band of whatever they are. They talk the New World Order. That's funny about, wrestling. Hulk Hogan screaming 10 years later about this is a New World Order of wrestling, brother. In the world of this movie, these gang of miscreant scumbags call themselves the New World Order. So she is about to be bumped off by these bad guys in this movie, and she manages to escape, and she survives repeated assassination attempts. And there's actually a really good, tense, suspenseful action sequence in a hospital, which from a cinematic perspective is probably the best scene in the movie, because none of this film could ever really happen. Not one scene in Cobra is remotely believable. And that's something that's different with Dirty Harry. Dirty Harry has the kind of stylish dramatics of a master filmmaker like a Don Siegel and a great movie star like Clint with a terrific script to work with. But Dirty Harry feels much more realistic and grounded. And part of that is the location work that Don Siegel did, shooting almost the entire film in the city of San Francisco as it looked in 1971. There's almost nothing in Cobra that could happen. Even the scene in the hospital, which cinematically is fantastic, you look at it and you just start poking, well, no, this couldn't happen, and this couldn't happen, and this couldn't happen, and this couldn't happen, and this couldn't happen. It's one thing after another, but it's a movie. We go with it. And there's so many scenes in this film that I absolutely love. I mean, it's so stupid. There's a moment early in the film where Stallone gets back to us. We've got a really nice apartment, by the way. At least we see him go home. Harry Callahan, as far as we know, he lives and sleeps in police headquarters. Guy doesn't have a home, apparently. We never see him at home. I don't even know if they shot scenes of him at home somewhere in San Francisco. But there's an early scene, kind of played for laughs, where a couple of local kids are fucking around with Stallone's car. They take his spot, and there's this kind of funny sequence where he kind of roughs up one of the kids, and then after that they're his buddy, and that's funny. But he goes home, and we see him preparing some of his kind of high-tech mid-'80s weaponry, and he's eating pizza. He's got like half a slice of pizza. I guess that's all that he's eating for an entire day. But he's 190 pounds, 17-inch arms, even though all he eats is a half a slice of pizza. Apparently that's all he eats in the whole film, I think. So he's doing this stuff where he's getting a weapon ready, and he's doing all sorts of stuff with this weaponry. And there's a Toys R Us commercial on TV. And even as a little boy, watching the kind of juxtaposition of Stallone with these weapons of death, these instruments of mass destruction, it's the Toys R Us time of year. Absolute gold. I mean, whoever's idea that was, if it was Sly or Cosmatos, gold. Cinematic gold. And I defy anyone not to laugh when that scene happens, because I'm giggling just thinking about it now. So the movie, unfortunately, the tension legitimate tension, despite how idiotic everything is, the tension that the movie builds up in the first half, it kind of lets out like an air balloon, like an opening balloon, when Stallone and Brigitte Nielsen's character leave Los Angeles, and I guess they're going up into the mountains or the hills, wherever. The idea is, yes, we're going to send you and her to a safe house. We just want to get you and these killers out of the city, though. We just want to get them out of the city, and at least if they go out there and try to take a pop at you, then we can stop them, because then we'll be able to lock it. Like, logically, it makes sense. Like, that's something, okay, well, this is not that far-fetched. They're not just sending Sly out to his doom. They know that if somebody tries to kill him, they'll find out about it, and maybe then they can stop these gang of murderous psycho killers, or whatever you want to say. So in my film theory paper, for which I received an A, and I ended up getting an A in that class, which was not an easy class, if I may say. Film theory is a difficult undergraduate class. I made the argument that the only real reason that Brigitte Nielsen's character is in the film is to let us know that Cobretti is heterosexual. Thank goodness. Oh my God. Thank goodness. As if one has anything to do with the other. But there's really no other purpose narratively for her to be in there, and I almost wish that she wasn't, because I think if the film stays in Los Angeles, I feel like it was on its way to being better than it actually is, because it was building suspense and tension, and then all of a sudden you're in the middle of nowhere, and now it's just a question of who's going to kill who first. Is his partner going to get bumped off? You know, in Dirty Harry, the character of Gonzalez gets shot, and spoiler alert, he gets shot in this one too. Brigitte is okay. She doesn't look that great. They give her a kind of unflattering hairstyle, but I realize her and Stallone were married, but I felt and feel like they have good chemistry in this movie. There were some people that said, yeah, no wonder the marriage didn't work because they had no I don't really agree with that, because Sly's character is presented as somebody who is so closed off, he's so tight, that it would make sense that he would not easily open up to another person. So you have a lot of conventional 80s and 90s action sequences. There's some car chases, and Stallone's car, by the way, I think it's a 1950 Mercury. Is it a Mercury Phantom? I think it's called a Phantom. It's an incredible car, and there's a great chase through Los Angeles, and even a few laughs. The movie is not funny at all. It has a couple of one-liners, but his car is fucking awesome in this movie. There's these big action sequences. There's some fights. There's some good editing by Cosmatos. There's shit blowing up real good, and the movie climaxes at, similar to the original Dirty Harry, a kind of abandoned type of a factory where there's a lot of industrial machinery operating, some real dangerous industrial machinery. And Stallone, he kind of fulfills the function of the old school gunfighter in a Western, even though the movie's not a Western, and he's not really a gunfighter. But it's almost closer to fulfilling the tenets of the Western than the typical cop film. And without giving it all away, the film ends exactly as you would expect it to. This isn't a movie that's trying to challenge or push the envelope. It does exactly what is expected in an action film, especially in 80s action films. So I feel like there were some action movies in the 90s which they were movies that just took more chances. And even something like Die Hard takes more chances. I mean, Die Hard is a way better movie. It was only 2 years later. But there weren't that many risks being taken in this kind of sort of disposable action. When you think about Beverly Hills Cop, think about 48 Hours. They don't really take that many risks. They're not trying to alienate the audience. They want people to see the movie and then hopefully see the movie again. You know, come back for seconds, as they say. Stallone is entertaining as Cobretti. He delivers his lines, like he drops his voice an octave. He's trying not to sound like Rocky Balboa.
And this is where the law stops and I start.
A deliberate choice. And when the movie wraps up, we're kind of scratching our head saying, what the fuck did we just see? This is not really anything like what you expected. It's not a conventional cop film. It's not a conventional suspense film or a conventional thriller. Well, what is it? I don't know. Yeah, it's a cop film. But in the same way as I've talked about this Steven Seagal movie, Out for Justice, it's only a cop film because his character is a cop. To call it a cop film that's not really what it is. And it's difficult to say that Cobra is a cop film, even though he is a cop, because there's so little that takes place. There's so little that takes place that is not kind of according to the specifications of, like, each character is a type. They're not real characters. Wrong-headed commanding officer, damsel in distress, lone wolf, tough cop, loyal partner. There's no creativity, there's no invention here, there's nothing. The most creative thing that they did was cast Rennie Santoni and Andrew Robinson in key roles, and that was on Stallone. It was his idea. Other than that, it's rote and workmanlike, and it is kind of a carbon copy of better movies such as Dirty Harry. Even the next year, James Woods did a cop film called simply Cop, which is way better than Cobra. And Sly has, and he talked about it years and years ago, he wanted to revisit the character of Marion Cobretti. He felt that they left it on the table, that there was a better movie to be made from the original idea. They just didn't find it. You know, sometimes it just be like that sometimes, where he liked the character, and to me, it is a fascinating character. They don't do enough with it. There's no growth. There's not even an attempt to find out what makes this guy tick. Nothing. Not exaggerating. You watch the movie, you'll see. There is nothing in a way of character growth or development from any of the characters. Zero. Whatever previous identification or prior identification we have with the actors, that's what they are. It's Sylvester Stallone reading lines. And he talked about wanting to do a sequel like in the late 80s. And, well, obviously it's not going to happen. It's 38 years later. But I feel like that's a movie that should have had a sequel, because they could have done something different with the character, who, as I say, is an interesting character. He is fascinating, and they don't take advantage of the fact that this guy on the surface is different than Dirty Harry. He's dirtier than Dirty Harry. And Sly is committed. He looks great. And, you know, his sunglasses, and as I say, the car. The film just isn't good. And yet, it's my number one guilty pleasure movie. I have seen it at least 20 times, start to finish. So even as I'm sitting here telling you, it's not good. It's a misfire. It should be better. Somehow, I watch this movie and it's 90 minutes of me giggling and cackling and making fun of the characters and the stupidity of some of the villains. It is a guilty pleasure delight. Just shut your brain off and have fun with it. And more so than any movie, really, I can't think of another movie that I would say, like Action Jackson, I would argue is a way better movie than Cobra, because that's a film you could consider a guilty pleasure movie, because it's not a great movie. But at least in that movie, you know, Sly's friend, the late great Carl Weathers, there was at least an attempt to explore the character of Jericho Jackson. That they're trying to do something other than just blow shit up, and Carl Weathers looks fucking jacked in that movie, and he gets framed for murder. There is an attempt to do something other than what Cobra does. What Cobra does is give you 90 minutes of mindless absurdity, action, shit blowing up real good, Sly looking great in his sunglasses and driving a cool car and firing a machine gun hundreds of times without ever reloading. It's a bad movie, but it is a bad movie that I absolutely adore. 1986's Cobra, directed by George Pan Cosmatos, starring Sylvester Stallone, Brigitte Nielsen, Rennie Santoni, Andrew Robinson, and Brian Thompson. My first in what could be a series of best guilty pleasure movies. This has been episode 153 of the Confessions of a Not So Dangerous Mind podcast. I'd like to thank you all for joining me for this very rainy Saturday late afternoon in New York. And I hope you enjoyed this episode. And if you catch it on the YouTube channel, haven't done so already, please click like, subscribe, comment, share, turn on those notifications. Or if you catch this episode on the audio platforms such as Spotify or iTunes, same rule applies. Click like, subscribe, share, and turn on those notifications. I'll be back in the studio for episode 154 real soon. Until then, peace.